Hi, for Learning Unit 10, we will be looking at social stratification. Governments proclaim that their citizens are all equal before the law. Scientists assert that all of humankind is descended from a common stock. Humanitarians lobby for legislation to equalize the lifestyles of all members of society. The idea that all humans are, or should be, equal is a frequent theme, at least in the cultures of Western societies. And yet, perhaps the very insistence on this theme reflects the reality that people are anything but equal. Similar-looking babies in hospital nurseries are socialized into quite different adults, not only in appearance, but differences in gender, age, skin color, manner of dress, and speech. These differences are easily visible. More important are the differences that affect people's lives dramatically, among which are the amounts of wealth, status, and power that individuals possess. Differences are characteristic of all life forms. In human societies, however, the way the differences are interpreted is immensely important. That is, what counts are the social meaning people give both to chance biological facts and to cultural threats, judged as being more or less desirable. Consequently, they are ranked, and in ranking, there is always a degree of inequality. In other words, because some threats are valued more highly than others, people who lack the valued threats are not considered equal to those who have them. By the same token, because many resources are scarce and hard to obtain in the most societies, those who have less of these scarce resources are not equal to those who have more of them. So the reality is that people are anything but equal. Social stratification is the intentional and unintentional categorization of people to establish differences in rank or social value. The physical world is full of examples of inequality. The fact that it is common knowledge that the bigger fish eats the smaller fish indicates that inequality is taken for granted in nature. Some individuals in each group have an advantage in the task of survival. Social scientists are not concerned with that type of inequality. Of concern is the fact that all human societies practice social differentiation. People everywhere are categorized according to traits such as sex, age, race, ethnic background, and religion, and according to how much of the scarce resources such as wealth, power, and prestige they possess. Further, based on having or lacking some of the above attributes, people are ranked. Ranking involves a value judgment. In effect, the society establishes that it is better to be one thing than another, to have more of some things than less. Eventually, ranking results in stratification, a condition in which categories of people in a society are treated unequally. All groups, such as human as well as animal, eventually develop a social hierarchy or dominance order. The reason for such a hierarchy is to provide an orderly method of access to and distribution of resources. In a way, it is a method of preventing continuous fighting over scarce and therefore especially desired resources. In simple societies, there is a social differentiation based on sex and age. Sometimes, as a reward for special talents, some individuals or groups are given greater amounts of prestige, influence, and wealth. From an economic point of view, equal, though they are differentiated according to sex and age, men and women, young and old, have different statuses and perform different roles. In addition, the most talented hunters, those who exhibit special skills in magic, and the elderly who have some knowledge resulting from experience, all have higher position in the tribe. They are given more respect and honor. In effect, their words and decisions carry more weight than those of the lesser endowed individuals. They may receive an extra ration of meat or drier shelter. However, the inequality is limited to single individual and not to whole categories of people. This is an important distinction from the way inequality occurs in more complex societies. The more complex societies are, the more unequally they tend to distribute their scarce goods. The unequal distribution of scarce resources is called social stratification. Stratified societies use a system of ranking according to wealth, prestige, and power. Wealth is how much of the societal resources a person's on, and then prestige is the degree of honor a person's position in society evokes, and power is the degree to which a person can direct factors. Wealth, which includes income and property, is an element of social class, whereas prestige is an element of status. In turn, class, status, and power are the so-called dimensions of stratification. That is, stratification systems are analyzed by looking at each of these phenomena. Stratification occurs in every society that has produced a surplus. A society that produces no surplus gives little opportunity to acquire wealth or prestige and power based on them. Thus, stratification is intimately related to economics because the layering of people into social levels boils down to attempts to answer the question, who gets what and why? That is, how shall the scarce resources in the society be distributed? Different societies answer this question differently according to their economic systems. Consequently, their stratification systems are varied too. There are two theoretical views on social stratification. The first one is from the view of the functionalist. Functionalists stress the needs of the society rather than those of the individual, reasoning that the needs of individuals can be satisfied only within the society. The existence of every society depends on the regular performance of specific tasks that are difficult and require special intelligence, talent, and training. Societies must institute systems of rewards with which to lure the most talented, the most intelligent, and the best trained individuals to perform this task. The position most essential to the welfare of a society and positions for which there are few qualified personnel must be the ones that are most highly rewarded. And then, the second view is from the conflict theorists, who argue that inequality is the product of the conflicts and decisions that originate in people's desire for power. The possession of scarce resources gives the possessor power. Groups struggle with one another to obtain power, and the group that emerges victorious tries to impose a stratification system on the society. Thus, stratification systems are mechanisms of cohesion. The best known conflict theorist was Karl Marx. He stated that all of history was a record of class struggles caused by the unequal distribution of rewards in societies. All societies are stratified, according to Marx, because in every society, one group tries to protect its economic interest at the expense of other groups. A criticism of conflict theory and of Marxism in particular is that it neglects to address two important issues. First, that people are naturally unequal in the amount of talent and intelligence they have and the amount of work they are willing to do. And second, that to a great extent the existence of inequality is a motivating force for people. The functionalist and conflict theories of stratification are not mutually exclusive. There is evidence that societies exhibit stability and consensus as well as conflict and dissension. The basis of all stratification systems, as was noted, is ranking of people according to their possession of things that are scarce and therefore highly prized. These scarce resources are popularly categorized as wealth, prestige, and power, or in more sociological terms, class, status, and power. It is according to these dimensions that people are assigned a rank in society and relegated to a stratum with others who are ranked similarly. For class, although discussions of social class figure prominently in the media and the term is commonly used in conversation, most people would have difficulty defining the term with accuracy. According to Marx and Weber, as noted earlier, Karl Marx viewed the division of society into classes as determined by the relationship of a group in society to the means of production. Groups that own a large proportion of the society's wealth, particularly the tools and capital necessary to produce that wealth, have control over groups that own little of either. The groups lacking capital must sell their labor in order to survive. Thus, Marx's approach to stratification and his concept of class are essentially economic in nature. Arguing that the Marxist view was too simplistic and that class was only one dimension of stratification, the renowned sociologist Max Weber proposed a threefold approach to the phenomenon and added the concept of life chances to his definition of class. In life chances, property is not the only determinant of class, according to Weber. Equally important are a person's life chances. Life chances in Weber's are the opportunities that each individual has of fulfilling his or her potential in life. A person's life chances are determined by his or her position within the stratification system. The higher that position is, the more access there is to scarce resources, and thus the more positive are the life chances of the individual. The lower the position, the less access there is to scarce resources, and the more negative are the life chances. Today, the Weberian concept of class tends to predominate. As for status, status is the degree of social esteem that an individual or group enjoys in society. In the Weberian sense, status means prestige rather than simply a position within the social system. The most important element of status is that it is a ranked position, which can be high, middle, and low, and determined by how the role attached to the status is valued. For instance, because the role of physician, particularly that of a specialist in a difficult field, is highly valued in our society, then that position has a high status. There is frequently overlap between class and status, but the overlap does not always or necessarily occur. Some people may have high incomes and lack status. Conversely, some may have high status and lack a substantial incomes. Status is very important to most people, and the desire to obtain high status is learned as part of socialization. The concern for status influences almost every kind of decision, from the choice of a car to the choice of a spouse. Although high-ranking occupations generally carry with them high incomes, this is not always the case. It is true for specialized physicians, some attorneys, and many corporate executives, but it is not true for college professors and research scientists. Additional determinants of status are being born into a highly respected family, living in the right kind of neighborhood, attending private preparatory schools, and belonging to exclusive country clubs and being members. The factors that influence social status then include occupation and source of income, race, education, sex, age, religion, and ethnic origin. The third important dimension of stratification, which is power, some consider it the most important dimension. Power is defined as the ability to carry out one's wishes in spite of resistance. It is the ability to get others to do what one wants them to do, with or without their consent. Stratification based on power is, in Weber's view, essentially political rather than economic. As applied to stratification, power can be divided into personal power and social power. Personal power is the freedom of individuals to direct their own lives in a way they themselves choose, without much interference. Such freedom often goes with great wealth. Social power is the ability to make decisions that affect entire communities or even the whole society. Social power may be exercised legitimately with the consent of the members of society. In this case, it is called authority. Parents, teachers, and the government all represent different levels of authority. Social power may also be exercised illegitimately, that is, without the official approval of society. Organized crime, for instance, exercises power illegitimately. Power is probably the most important dimension of stratification because it affects the manner in which society's goods and services are distributed. It is deeply interwoven with other dimensions, class and status. High-status individuals have little trouble attaining positions of power, either in government, the professions, or corporate and banking circles. In turn, those in positions of power can control decision-making in such a way that events are favorable to them. Historically, societies have exhibited a variety of stratification systems. A stratification system is the overlapping manner in which societal members are ranked into classes, status groups, and hierarchies of power. To distinguish among them, social scientists use model, abstract conceptions that they place on an ideal continuum. At one extreme of the continuum is the closed or caste stratification system. The middle is represented by the estate system. At the other extreme is the open or class system. The stratification system of each society fits somewhere along this ideal continuum. Thus, social stratification appears to be unavoidable. Some activities are more important to society than others. Some activities can only be carried out by people of outstanding ability or special training. For example, political positions must be filled, economic activities must be organized, and military forces must be commanded. Those who play such important roles acquire power and prestige as well as larger than average incomes. There are two types of systems of stratification. The first one is the closed or caste stratification system. In a closed or caste stratification system, class status and power are ascribed, that is, determined strictly on the basis of family inheritance rather than on individual effort or merit. In a closed society, the individual is born into a specific social stratum called a caste and has no opportunity to move in or out of it. Classical India offers a good example of a closed society. The caste system that flourished in India for many centuries was distinguished by the fact that people were divided into a number of castes, representing areas of service to society and ranked in order of their importance to it. Religion and tradition forbade members of one caste to intermarry or interact in any way with members or other castes. Each caste was restricted in occupation, and the status of each individual was ascribed, so that a person inherited a specific social position and was unable to change it regardless of effort or achievement. The caste system has been legally abolished in modern India, but many Indians, particularly those living in rural areas, may still follow the caste system that for so long had been justified by religion and traditional morals. The term estate refers not to land but to groups such as the nobility, the clergy, merchants, artisans, and peasants. The estate stratification system developed in Europe under feudalism. The estate to which a person belonged and its place in the social hierarchy were determined chiefly by custom, occupation, rights and obligations with respect to land and other legal sanctions. In an estate system, the position of an individual in society is nearly always inherited from parents. The lines between groups are clearly drawn, and almost everyone knows just where they belong. They may even be required to dress in a particular way to indicate their station in relation to those above. Mobility is small, but is entirely possible. In feudal times, a noble could free a serf from bondage to the land in return for a special service, or a king could bestow a title of nobility. Military service and the priesthood are also possible avenues of upward mobility in an estate system. The medieval estate system and its relatively rigid social categories was better suited to a static than to a dynamic society. It gradually disintegrated under the impact of such changes as the decline of feudalism, the Industrial Revolution, and the rise of democratic ideology with its strong emphasis on freedom and equality. The second type of system of stratification is the open society or the class system. Modern industrial and post-industrial societies such as the United States most nearly approximate the model of an open society. Open or class societies have these characteristics in common. Classes exist but are not institutionalized as in the caste and estate system. Class lines are unclear, so people do not display excessive class consciousness, but inequality stemming from class divisions is apparent. Status is usually achieved, but there is evidence to indicate that status tends to be ascribed to the lowest and the highest social classes, and social mobility is possible and occurs frequently. Open or class systems work best in industrial societies that have market economies because these offer more opportunities for achieving wealth and status than do societies with centralized economies. Social mobility, essentially changing class membership, is possible and encouraged in open system. However, it is not evenly distributed in the society. Limitations based on racial, ethnic, regional, educational, and even religious factors restrict mobility. However, the individual is still permitted much more leeway for social as well as physical movement than in closed systems. Class systems in all societies have certain characteristics in common. The rise of social classes is almost always accompanied by the development of central political institutions, foremost among which is the state. Moreover, the more surplus a society produces, the more stratified it is and the more complex its class system is. Finally, power and wealth appear to be the most important elements of class systems, with prestige playing a less important role. In contemporary industrial societies, power and wealth are closely interconnected in both capitalist and socialist economies. In capitalist countries, the wealthy are more likely to come to power, and in socialist nations, the powerful are likely to become wealthy. However, the stratification systems of both kinds of economies are strikingly similar. Societies that have a long tradition of feudal-like stratification, although they have become open in the industrial era, retain strong class boundaries. Social scientists disagree not only about the number of social classes in existence, but also about the standards that determine who belongs in which class. The categories used by researchers to pigeonhole people into social classes are arbitrary and artificial. The fact that social classes are not perfectly clear-cut entities is proven by the inability of social scientists to come to any general agreement on just how many of them should be recognized as existing. In a democratic industrial society, social status is a continuum, with individuals and families scattered along it from top to bottom. If we divide people on this social scale into 2, 3, or more social classes, we must do so arbitrarily. Social scientists also have difficulty in deciding just what criteria should be used in determining social status. Some would place an individual or family in a given class entirely on the basis of economic considerations. Those who take this point of view usually put their chief emphasis on income. Others, probably the majority, would determine the status of an individual by general social standing, that is, by whether the community, on the basis of various criteria, places the individual high or low on the social scale. The combination of hierarchies, education, occupation, and income forms an individual's socio-economic status. The concept of life chances, particularly the fact that they differ according to social class, was noted in the earlier discussion of Weber's view on social class. Not only do life chances differ, however, there are marked differences in lifestyles encompassing such characteristics as family life, child-rearing, education, personal values, consumption, leisure activities, political outlook, religion, and health. The bottom line is, of course, that the consequences of different positions in the stratification system make for a great deal of inequality. These differences in lifestyles are described in very general terms. They are not to be understood as fitting every individual in the social class described. They are differences in lifestyles associated with a social class, affecting areas such as family life, child-rearing, education, politics, health, arrest and conviction, and also values. As for the consequences of social class, for family life, because people tend to marry partners in their own social class, clear patterns eventually emerge. From the point of view of marriage stability, there are fewer divorces among the upper classes. The higher divorce rate among the lower classes may be caused by the frustration and anxiety that economic problems and unemployment created. In lower class families, marriages are much more patriarchal with respect to sex roles. Women tend to interact to a greater extent with female relatives and men with male friends than in the higher social classes. As for child rearing, middle and upper class child rearing practices stress independence of action and behavior according to principle of right and wrong. Parents in these social classes tend to use temporary withdrawal of labor rather than physical punishment for social control. Parents in the latter tend to emphasize obedience to rules and staying out of trouble and tend to punish infringements more harshly. Each social class is preparing its offspring to follow in its occupational footsteps. And then there is effect of social class to education. The different socialization experiences led middle and upper class children to be more successful academically, a fact reinforced by values that stress such achievement. This academic advantage tends to further upward social mobility of the children. And then the effect on politics. Although there are regional and of course individual differences, in general terms, it appears that being a registered voter, voting regularly in elections, and taking an interest in civil and political affairs are activities engaged in more frequently the higher one's social class. The affluent are more liberal on social issues such as abortion, rights, feminist issues, affirmative action, and so on. Those on lower social standing tend to be liberal on economic issues that favor them. And then the effect of social class to health. Those with higher income can purchase more health and medical care than those with lower income. Studies have shown that the incidence of disease among the higher social classes is smaller than among the lower classes for that reason. Both the incidence and treatment of mental illness are much higher for lower class persons than for the upper classes. In particular, lower class patients are much more likely to be treated with tranquilizing drugs and to be hospitalized in state institutions for long periods. Social class also have consequences on the arrest and conviction and also values. The rates of arrest and conviction are higher for lower class individuals than for members of the upper and middle classes. The harsher treatment by the criminal justice system is partially due to the types of crimes committed by lower class persons, which can be robbery, burglary, larceny, and auto theft, as opposed to those committed by middle and upper class persons, which can be forgery, tax evasion, fraud, and embezzlement. The latter crimes are not considered to be as wrong as the former because violence is seldom involved. Finally, persons of a higher social class can generally afford a better legal defense. And then for values, research has shown that, in general, middle and upper class people have feeling of control over their lives. The higher social classes engage in long-range planning a greater extent than do people from the lower social classes, probably because the latter have a much less bright future to look forward to. The values and attitudes of the higher social classes tend to set the standard for the society. One of the principal differences between open and closed societies is that there is social mobility in open societies and none or very little in closed societies. The term social mobility refers to an individual's ability to change social class membership, status, life chances, and lifestyles by moving up or down the ladder represented by the stratification system of society. Social scientists also distinguish between vertical mobility, which occurs in an upward or downward direction, and horizontal mobility, which occurs when there is a change of status without a consequent change of class. For instance, vertical mobility may be exemplified by a high school teacher who is promoted to principal. This is upward mobility, or the principal who proves ineffective as an administrator and is demoted back into the classroom. So this is downward mobility. A school superintendent who takes a job as an executive of an insurance company at approximately the same salary is horizontally mobile. Who are the upwardly mobile? Various factors are responsible for vertical mobility, some dependent on personality traits, others on social circumstance. From studies on upward mobility, a profile of the upwardly mobile individual has emerged. The upwardly mobile individual is likely to be an urban resident, comes from a small family, influenced by ambitious parents, likely to have more education than his or her parents, one who marries later and tends to marry a partner of higher status, and one who waits to establish a family and limits its size to no more than 2 children. Thus, we might even have to fight our way to the top. Poverty is a tragic side effect of inequality. Women, children, minorities, and elderly tend to be poor in greater proportions than other segments of the population. In recent years, the gap between the rich and the poor has widened in the United States, that is according to Perry and Perry in 2000. How do you think Malaysia is doing where poverty and inequality are concerned? The idea that all humans are or should be equal is a frequent theme in most societies. The reality is that people are anything but equal. People are not born with equal potentials for learning and achieving, nor are they born into equally favorable environments. Nevertheless, equality before the law and equality of opportunity are strongly cherished democratic ideals, and we should keep striving to come closer to them.